I still remember the way the sunlight hit the kitchen counter that morning, slicing through the blinds in those long, dusty lines that made everything look golden and false. I was standing there in my bare feet, the tile cold against my arches, pouring coffee into a mug that had a chip on the rim I'd been meaning to throw out for 3 years. Derek was already dressed, which was unusual for a Saturday. He had his suit on, the navy one with the subtle pinstripe, and he was scrolling through his phone with that tight, clenched jaw he gets when he's thinking about work or money or something he hasn't decided to tell me about yet. We had been married for 11 years, and I knew every line on his face, every shift in his posture, every silence that meant more than the words he actually spoke. That morning, I thought I knew everything. I thought our life was just a little off-center, like a picture frame that needed a gentle nudge. I had no idea I was standing at the edge of a cliff and that Derek was about to push me off with a smile on his face. He set his phone down on the counter and looked at me, really looked at me, the way he used to when we first started dating in that cramped studio apartment in Boston, when we didn't have 2 dimes to rub together but we had all the time in the world. His eyes softened, and for a second I felt a flicker of the old warmth, the thing that made me say yes when he got down on one knee in the middle of a rainstorm in Harvard Square. Then he spoke and his voice was gentle, almost hesitant, and that should have been my first warning. Derek was never hesitant about anything. He was a corporate attorney who made his living by never showing a crack in his armor. But that morning his voice had a tremor in it, a vulnerability that I mistook for intimacy. "I need to tell you something," he said, and he reached across the counter and took my hand. His palm was warm, a little sweaty, and he squeezed my fingers like he was trying to transmit something through his skin. "I've been thinking about us, about what we're missing, and I realized that I haven't been the husband you deserve." I remember feeling my throat tighten. I thought he was going to confess to an affair. I had suspected it, honestly, in the quiet hours of the night when he'd come home late smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, or when he'd take his phone into the bathroom and lock the door. I had prepared myself for that confession. I had practiced the speech in my head, the one where I would be calm and dignified, the one where I would tell him to pack his bags and leave. I had already started rebuilding my life in my mind, a single woman in a smaller apartment with a cat and a bookshelf full of novels I never had time to read. I was ready for infidelity. I was ready for betrayal, but I was not ready for what came out of his mouth next. "I love you more than anything," he said, and he brought my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles. "And I want to do something for you. Something that will make you feel alive again, something that will remind you how desirable you are." I pulled my hand back, confused. "What are you talking about, Derek?" He took a breath and I could see him steadying himself, the lawyer preparing his argument. "I've been reading about alternative lifestyles," he said, and the word came out in a rush like he was ripping off a bandage. "About polyamory and open relationships and cuckolding. I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. I want to watch you with another man. No, wait, I want to watch you with 2 men. I want to see you let go completely. I want to see someone else give you the pleasure I can't." I remember laughing. I actually laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound that bounced off the stainless steel appliances and echoed in the silent kitchen. "You're joking," I said. "This is some kind of sick test, isn't it? You're trying to see if I'll cheat on you so you can have a reason to leave me for that woman at your office, the one with the blonde highlights and the too tight skirts." But he shook his head and there was a desperate urgency in his eyes that I had never seen before. "It's not a test, it's the opposite. I want to be there. I want to participate. I want it to be something we do together. I have it all planned out. There are 2 men I know, professionals, discreet, they do this sort of thing. They're not just random guys, they're athletes, built, experienced. I've already talked to them." The world tilted. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself and the chip on the mug dug into my palm. "You've already talked to them," I whispered. "You've already arranged this without asking me, without even knowing if I would want something like this." He stepped closer and he put his hands on my shoulders and his grip was firm, almost possessive. "I know you, Chloe. I know you better than you know yourself. You're bored, you're stifled, you've been a housewife for so long you've forgotten the wild woman I married. The woman who used to drag me to underground clubs and kiss strangers on the dance floor just to make me jealous. I want that woman back. I need her back. This isn't about me being weak. This is about me being strong enough to give you what you need." I should have screamed. I should have slapped him. I should have called my sister and told her to come pick me up with a moving van, but I didn't. I stood there frozen as his words burrowed under my skin like parasites. Because the terrible truth was that a part of me, a small, hidden, shameful part, felt a thrill at what he was suggesting. Not because I wanted to be with other men, but because I wanted to feel wanted. I had been invisible for so long, the woman who made the dinners and planned the vacations and remembered to buy his mother a birthday present. I had ceased to be a person with desires of my own. And here was my husband, offering me a chance to be seen, to be desired, to be the center of a fantasy he had constructed specifically around me. It was twisted and wrong and deeply, profoundly messed up, but it was also the first time in years that he had looked at me with anything resembling passion. "Who are they?" I heard myself ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Tell me who they are." His face relaxed and I saw relief flood his features. He thought he had won, he thought I was saying yes. And in that moment, I wasn't sure if I was saying yes or just asking for information, just buying myself time, just trying to understand the scope of the nightmare he was proposing. "Their names are Marcus and Deshawn," he said, and he pulled out his phone, showing me photos. They were both black men, athletic, with broad shoulders and confident smiles. One had a shaved head and a gold chain around his neck, the other had dreadlocks and a neat beard. They looked like they belonged in a magazine, not in my bedroom, not in my marriage. "They're gym owners," Derek said. "They do this as a side thing. They're paid, it's transactional, there's no emotional involvement, it's just about pleasure. They'll come here to our house this Friday night. I'll be there the whole time. I'll be in the room watching. I want to see everything, Chloe. I want to see you lose yourself completely." I pushed away from the counter and walked to the window, staring out at our manicured lawn, the sprinkler ticking back and forth, the neighbors' kids riding their bikes on the sidewalk. It was such a normal suburban scene, the kind of picture-perfect life I had always wanted. And now my husband was proposing to shatter it, to invite two strangers into our home to do things I couldn't even say out loud. I felt sick. I felt a rage building in my chest, a white-hot fury that made my hands shake. But then I thought about the alternative. I thought about divorce, about the lawyers, about dividing up our assets, about telling my parents, my friends, about the pitying looks and the whispered questions. I thought about being alone at 42, starting over, trying to date in a world that had moved on without me. And I thought about Derek, who had been my best friend for over a decade, who had held my hand when my father died, who had stayed up all night with me when I had the flu, who had promised to love me forever. Could I really throw that away because of one insane, perverted fantasy? I turned back to face him and I saw hope in his eyes and also something else, something darker, dominance. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying the power he had over me, the way he could drop a bomb like this into my lap and watch me scramble to pick up the pieces. And I hated him for it. In that moment, I hated him more than I had ever hated anyone. But I was also terrified of losing him. And that terror was stronger than my rage, stronger than my self-respect, stronger than every instinct screaming at me to run. "Okay," I said, and the word felt like ash in my mouth. "I'll do it, but I'm not promising anything. If I change my mind, they leave, no questions asked." He crossed the room in 3 strides and wrapped his arms around me, crushing me against his chest. "Thank you," he whispered into my hair. "Thank you, baby. This is going to save us. You'll see, we're going to come out of this stronger than ever." I stood in his embrace, rigid, unresponsive. I could feel his heart beating against my cheek, a steady, rhythmic thump that seemed to mock me. He was so sure of himself. He was so certain that this was the answer to all our problems. But as he held me, I looked over his shoulder at the reflection in the window, at the two of us framed in the glass like a portrait of a happy couple, and I felt nothing. Nothing but a cold, creeping dread. And underneath that dread, a tiny, dangerous spark of curiosity. What would it feel like? What would it be like to be touched by someone who wasn't Derek, someone who didn't know my history, my insecurities, my baggage? What would it be like to be seen as nothing but a woman, a vessel for desire? I pushed those thoughts away, burying them deep. I told myself I was just playing along, just humoring him until he came to his senses. But I knew even then that I was lying to myself, because when I closed my eyes, I didn't see Derek's face. I saw Marcus and Deshawn. I saw their strong hands and their confident smiles, and I felt a flutter in my chest that was equal parts fear and fascination. The seed had been planted, and it was already starting to grow. The week leading up to Friday was a slow-motion car crash. Derek was more attentive than he'd been in years, bringing me flowers, cooking dinner, rubbing my feet while we watched television. But every gesture felt like a bribe, every kiss a down payment on the transaction that was coming. He talked about the plan constantly, filling in details I didn't want to know. They would arrive at 8, we'd have a drink, then we'd go upstairs. He'd set up a chair in the corner of the bedroom. He would be silent, just watching. He had a safe word, pineapple, in case I wanted to stop at any moment. He assured me they had been vetted, that they were clean and safe, that they would respect my boundaries. He said all the right things, but his eyes were hungry. He was already living in the fantasy, and I was just the actress he had cast to play the lead role. By the time Friday arrived, I was a ghost in my own life. I went through the motions of the day like a sleepwalker. I went to the grocery store, I cleaned the house. I showered and shaved my legs and put on makeup I hadn't worn in months. I picked out a dress I had bought for a gala we never ended up attending, a deep crimson number that clung to my curves and made me feel, for a moment, powerful. I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She was nervous, yes, but there was something else in her eyes, Excitement, anticipation, a secret thrill that made her cheeks flush and her pulse quicken. I despised her, and I wanted to be her. At 7:50, the doorbell rang. The sound of that doorbell cut through me like a blade. I was standing in the living room, gripping a glass of white wine so hard I thought the stem might snap, and when the chime echoed through the house, my entire body seized up. Derek was already at the door before I could even draw a breath. He had this manic energy about him, this almost giddy excitement that made him look 10 years younger and 10 times more unhinged. He swung the door open with a flourish, like he was unveiling a masterpiece, and there they were. Marcus and Deshawn. They were even more imposing in person than they had been in the photos. They both seemed to fill the doorway, broad shoulders blocking out the evening light, and they carried themselves with that easy, confident swagger that comes from knowing you are the most powerful people in any room. Marcus was the one with the shaved head, and he was wearing a crisp white t-shirt that stretched across his chest and a pair of dark jeans that fit him like they were painted on. Deshawn had the dreadlocks, and he was slightly taller with a quiet intensity in his eyes that made me feel like he could see right through my dress, right through my skin, right into the rotten, confused core of me. Derek shook their hands like they were old friends, clapping them on the backs and ushering them inside like he was welcoming colleagues to a business dinner. He was practically vibrating with anticipation, and I watched him with a kind of detached horror, as if I were observing a stranger perform a role in a play I hadn't auditioned for. Marcus caught my eye and smiled, a slow, easy smile that was warm and unnerving at the same time. "You must be Chloe," he said, and his voice was low and smooth like honey poured over gravel. "Derek has told us a lot about you. You're even more beautiful than he described." I opened my mouth to say something, some polite deflection, but all that came out was a nervous giggle that made me want to sink into the floor. Deshawn stepped forward and took my hand, raising it to his lips and brushing a kiss across my knuckles. His lips were soft, and the gesture was so unexpectedly gentlemanly that I felt my cheeks flush. "Pleasure to meet you," he said, and his voice was deeper than Marcus's, a resonant bass that seemed to vibrate in my chest. "We're going to take good care of you tonight. Don't you worry about a thing." Derek was beaming, his arm sliding around my waist and pulling me close. "See," he whispered in my ear, his breath hot and damp. "They're perfect. This is going to be perfect." I wanted to elbow him in the ribs. I wanted to scream at him that nothing about this was perfect, that he was pimping me out to strangers in our own home, that our marriage had become a grotesque circus and he was the ringmaster. But instead I just smiled, a tight, brittle smile that felt like it was cracking my face, and I led them into the living room. We sat down, and the small talk that followed was the most surreal experience of my life. Derek poured them drinks, scotch for Marcus, bourbon for Deshawn, and they chatted about the gym they owned, about their clients, about the weather. It was so mundane, so achingly normal, that I started to convince myself this was all a bizarre dream. Maybe I had fallen asleep on the couch and I would wake up any minute and Derek would be snoring beside me and everything would be fine. But then Marcus leaned forward and placed his hand on my knee, and the warmth of his palm through the thin fabric of my dress jolted me back to reality. "You seem nervous, Chloe," he said, his thumb tracing a slow circle on my skin. "There's no need to be. We're just here to make you feel good. Whatever you want, whatever you need, we're here to give it to you." I looked at Derek, searching for some sign of jealousy, some flicker of doubt that might make him call this whole thing off. But his eyes were bright and hungry, and he nodded at me encouragingly, like a coach urging a player to take the winning shot. I felt a surge of anger so potent it almost made me dizzy. How dare he? How dare he sit there, calm and composed, while another man touched his wife and he just watched like a spectator at a tennis match? But my anger was a wild, unmoored thing, and it didn't know where to direct itself. Was I angry at Derek, at Marcus and Deshawn, at myself for being here, for agreeing to this, for letting it go this far? The answer was all of the above and none of it at the same time. Deshawn moved closer, his shoulder brushing against mine, and I felt the heat radiating off his body. "We've been looking forward to this all week," he said, and his voice was so close to my ear that I felt his breath stir my hair. "Derek told us you're a passionate woman, that you've been holding back, that you need someone to remind you how good it feels to let go." His hand came up to the back of my neck, his fingers massaging the tight knots of tension there, and despite everything I felt my eyes flutter closed. It felt good. It felt so good to be touched, to be handled with care, to feel like someone actually saw me as a woman and not just a household manager. I hated myself for how good it felt. Derek stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I'm going to go get the bedroom ready," he said, his voice too loud, too bright. He was practically skipping as he headed for the stairs, and I wanted to throw my wine glass at his retreating back. The moment he was gone, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Marcus and Deshawn exchanged a look, a private communication that I wasn't privy to, and then Marcus's hand was on my chin, tilting my face toward his. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, he said, and his eyes were serious now, the easy warmth replaced by something more intense. We're not here to pressure you, but if you want to go through with this, we need to know that you're in it, completely, not for him, for yourself. The question hung in the air between us, heavy and demanding. For myself. When was the last time I did anything for myself? I had spent 11 years building a life around Derek, around his career, his needs, his desires. I had shrunk myself down to fit into the spaces he left for me, and somewhere along the way I had lost the woman I used to be. The woman who wore red lipstick and danced on tables and didn't care who was watching. That woman had been buried so deep I wasn't sure if she even existed anymore. But here, in this moment, with two handsome strangers looking at me like I was the most desirable thing in the world, I felt a stirring, a whisper, a flicker of defiance. I'm in it, I heard myself say, and the words felt like a declaration of war, not against Derek, not against Marcus and Deshawn, but against the version of myself I had become, the safe one, the boring one. The one who said yes when she meant no and stayed quiet when she wanted to scream. Marcus smiled, and this time it was a different smile, darker, more predatory. Good, he said, then let's go upstairs. He took my hand and pulled me to my feet, and Deshawn was behind me, his hand resting on the small of my back, guiding me toward the staircase. Every step felt like I was walking to my own execution, but there was also a strange, electric thrill racing through my veins. The house felt different, wrong, like a funhouse mirror reflection of everything I had known. The photos on the wall of our wedding day, of our vacations, of our families, they all seemed to mock me as I passed them. This was not the life I had signed up for. This was a nightmare dressed up as a fantasy. And yet I kept walking. When we reached the bedroom, Derek was already there, sitting in the armchair in the corner like a king on his throne. He had dimmed the lights and lit candles, and the room had a flickering, almost romantic glow that was sickeningly incongruous with what was about to happen. He was clutching a glass of whiskey in his hand, and his leg was bouncing with nervous energy. He looked at me as I entered, and his eyes widened, drinking in the sight of me, flanked by two powerful men. You look incredible, he breathed. You're so beautiful, Chloe, I'm so lucky. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was too tight, my mind too crowded with conflicting emotions. Marcus guided me to the edge of the bed and sat me down, and then he knelt in front of me, his hands on my knees, spreading my legs apart. Deshawn moved behind me, his chest pressing against my back, his hands sliding over my shoulders and down my arms. They were encircling me, caging me, and yet I had never felt so free. It was a paradox I couldn't reconcile, but in that moment I stopped trying. I surrendered. Take your time, Marcus murmured, his fingers tracing up the inside of my thighs. We've got all night. I looked over at Derek, expecting to see his face twisted with jealousy, but he was leaning forward in his chair, his eyes wide and hungry, his lips parted. He was transfixed. He was getting exactly what he wanted, and I realized with a sudden, shocking clarity that this had never been about me. This had never been about giving me pleasure or making me feel alive. This was about him, his fantasy, his validation. His desperate need to feel powerful by orchestrating my submission. And that realization, more than anything else, broke something inside me. The anger I had been clinging to all week, the righteous fury, the indignation, it all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, aching sadness. I was a pawn in his game. I had always been a pawn, and the only way to stop being a pawn was to stop playing the game, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because a part of me, the part that had been starving for attention, for affection, for proof that I still mattered, had already woken up. And it was ravenous. The night unfolded in a blur of sensation and emotion that I can barely piece together now. I remember the roughness of Marcus's hands on my skin, the gentleness of Deshawn's lips on my neck. I remember the way the candlelight flickered across their bodies, glistening with sweat, and the deep, guttural sounds they made that were so different from Derek's careful, measured grunts. I remember Derek shifting in his chair, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his hand moving over himself, his eyes glued to me. I remember feeling a surge of power, an intoxicating sense of control, as I realized that I was the center of this universe, the sun around which they all orbited. For the first time in years, I was not invisible. I was the most seen person in the room. But I also remember the cold creeping in afterward. When Marcus and Deshawn were done, when they had dressed and said their goodbyes and walked out the door, I was left alone with Derek. He was glowing, exhilarated, chattering about how incredible it had been, how much closer we were now, how we should do it again soon. I sat on the edge of the bed, naked and exposed, the evidence of the night still on my skin, and I listened to him with a growing sense of detachment. He didn't see me. He didn't see the tears I was fighting back, the shame creeping up my spine, the hollow ache in my chest that had nothing to do with physical pleasure. He just saw his fantasy come to life, and I was the vessel that had made it happen. Chloe, are you okay? He was finally looking at me, his expression shifting from elation to concern. Did you like it? I opened my mouth to tell him the truth. I wanted to scream at him that I felt violated, used, degraded. I wanted to tell him that I had never felt more alone in my entire life than I did in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of his fantasy. But when I looked at his face, at the vulnerability beneath the bravado, the words died in my throat. He was my husband. He was the man I had loved for 11 years. And even though he had orchestrated this whole nightmare, even though he had pushed me into it without my consent, I couldn't bring myself to destroy him. "Yeah," I said, my voice flat and dead. "It was fine." He smiled, relieved, and leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head away. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he just didn't care. He was already planning the next one. I could see it in his eyes, the gears turning, the fantasies multiplying. And I knew with a certainty that settled in my bones like lead that this was not the end. This was just the beginning. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Derek snoring softly beside me, I made a silent promise to myself. I was going to find my way back to myself, the woman I had lost somewhere along the way. And if that meant going along with Derek's twisted games for a little while longer, so be it. Because I had learned something that night, something dangerous and powerful. I had learned that I could pretend. I could be whoever he wanted me to be. And while he was busy watching his fantasy unfold, he would never see the real me building her escape. But there was also something else, something I was too afraid to admit even to myself. The next morning when I woke up, I didn't feel the shame I expected. I felt a strange, unsettling hunger. I remembered the weight of Marcus and Deshawn, the way they had handled me, the way they had made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. And I knew with a dread that curdled in my stomach that I wanted more. Not for Derek, not for their marriage, for myself. That was the moment I realized I was lost. That was the moment I realized I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And that was the moment I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the person I was becoming was someone I didn't want to save. The weeks that followed that first night blurred together like watercolors left out in the rain. I moved through my days in a fog, going through the motions of being a wife, a homemaker, a neighbor who waved at the mailman and brought casseroles to sick friends. But inside, I was a different person entirely. The woman who had stood in that bedroom, surrounded by candlelight and strangers, had awakened something feral and hungry inside me. I tried to bury it, to smother it with routine and obligation, but it kept clawing its way back to the surface. Derek, of course, was ecstatic. He walked around the house with a perpetual smirk, like he had unlocked some secret level of marriage that no one else knew about. He kept bringing up that night, revisiting every detail like a film director analyzing his greatest scene. He wanted to know what I had felt, what I had thought, what I had enjoyed most. He wanted to relive it through my words, and I gave him what he wanted. I told him what he needed to hear, but I never told him the truth. The truth was that I couldn't stop thinking about Marcus's hands on my hips, the way Deshawn's voice had rumbled against my back. I couldn't stop thinking about the way they had looked at me, not like a wife or a mother or a friend, but like a woman. A desirable, powerful, electric woman. Derek had never looked at me like that, not really. He looked at me like I was his possession, his accomplishment, his security blanket. But those two men had looked at me like I was a force of nature, something to be revered and savored. And that difference, that stark, aching difference, was what kept me awake at night. I started to change, small things at first. I bought new clothes, things that were tighter and lower cut than anything I had worn in years. I started wearing makeup every day, even if I was just going to the grocery store. I started going to the gym, not because I needed to lose weight, but because I wanted to feel strong. I wanted to feel capable. I wanted to feel like the kind of woman who could command a room, who could walk into a bar and turn heads, who could look at a man and make him forget his own name. It was a vanity, I knew, a shallow and desperate grab for validation, but I didn't care. I was starving and I would eat anything. Derek noticed, of course. He encouraged it, praising my new outfits and my dedication to fitness. He thought it was all for him, a gift he had unlocked with his brilliant, perverse idea. He had no idea that I was becoming someone else entirely, someone who was slowly, inexorably slipping away from him. He asked me about 3 weeks after that first night if I wanted to do it again. We were sitting on the couch watching some mindless reality show, and he just turned to me with that hungry look in his eyes and said, "I've been thinking, maybe we should invite Marcus and Deshawn back, or maybe we could try someone new. I've been looking at some other profiles. There's this guy who's a firefighter, huge, and another one who's a personal trainer. I think you'd really like him." I didn't answer right away. I stared at the television, at the fake drama unfolding on the screen, and I felt that familiar war inside me. The part of me that was still his wife, still loyal and dutiful, wanted to say no, wanted to put my foot down and tell him that this was not who I was, that I didn't want to be his puppet anymore. But the other part, the one that had woken up in that candlelit bedroom, the one that had tasted power and desire and wanted more, said something entirely different. Maybe, I said, my voice carefully neutral. I'll think about it. He beamed. He actually beamed like I had just given him the greatest gift in the world. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to use this. I was going to use his twisted fantasy as a weapon, a tool to reclaim the parts of myself I had lost. I was going to play his game, but I was going to play it on my own terms. And I was going to make sure that when it was all over, I was the one holding all the cards. A few nights later, I called Marcus. I had kept his number just in case, and now I was glad I had. He answered on the second ring, his voice a low, amused rumble. Chloe. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Derek told me you might be interested in a repeat performance. This isn't about Derek, I said, and my voice was steady, confident, nothing like the nervous woman he had met before. This is about me. I want to see you again, but not with Derek, not in that house. I want to see you alone. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him thinking, weighing the implications. You know that's not how this works, he said finally. Your husband is the one who arranged this. He's the one paying us. We have a business arrangement. I know, I said, but I'm not asking you to break the arrangement. I'm just asking you to expand it. I want to see you without him watching. I want to see what it's like when it's just me and you, no audience, no performance, just two people. Another pause, longer this time. You're asking me to cross a line, Chloe. That's not a small thing. I know it's not, I said. But I also know that you enjoyed yourself that night. I saw it in your eyes. You liked having me. You wanted more. Don't pretend you didn't. He laughed, a low, dark sound that sent a shiver down my spine. You're a dangerous woman, you know that. I didn't see it that night. I thought you were just a bored housewife looking for a thrill, but you're something else entirely. I'm a woman who's done being invisible, I said. So what do you say? Can you meet me? He agreed. We set a time and a place, a hotel downtown, far enough from the suburbs that no one would recognize me. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark of my living room, my heart pounding in my chest. I had just done something I could never take back. I had just crossed a line that made that first night look like a minor transgression. But I didn't feel guilty. I felt alive. I felt like I was finally in control. The next few days were a masterclass in deception. I acted normal around Derek, going through the motions of our life, cooking his meals and folding his laundry and listening to his stories about work. I let him talk about the firefighter and the personal trainer, and I nodded along, making vague promises that I would think about it. He was so wrapped up in his own fantasies that he didn't notice the distance in my eyes, the way I pulled away when he tried to touch me. He didn't notice that I was already gone, that the woman he was living with was just a shell, a hologram, a placeholder for the real me who was busy planning her escape. The night of my meeting with Marcus, I told Derek I was going to a book club. It was a lie I had used before, a convenient cover for the many nights I had spent hiding in my car in the grocery store parking lot just to get away from him. He didn't question it. He kissed me on the forehead and told me to have fun, and I smiled and walked out the door and drove straight to the hotel. Marcus was waiting for me in the lobby, looking even more impossibly handsome than I remembered. He was wearing a dark suit that made him look like he was going to a funeral or maybe a wedding or maybe just a man who knew exactly how good he looked. He smiled when he saw me, a slow, predatory smile that made my stomach flip. You came, he said. I wasn't sure you would. I told you I would, I said. I keep my promises. He led me up to the room, a suite with a king-sized bed and a view of the city skyline. The lights of downtown glittered through the window, and for a moment I just stood there looking out at them, feeling like I was standing on the edge of something monumental. Marcus came up behind me, his hands settling on my hips, and he pressed his lips to the curve of my neck. You're trembling, he murmured. Are you scared? No, I said, and it was the truth. I'm not scared, I'm just ready. The hours that followed were unlike anything I had ever experienced. Marcus was patient and skilled and utterly present in a way that Derek had never been. He didn't ask me what I wanted. He just watched me, studied me, and gave it to me before I even knew I wanted it. He made me feel like I was the center of the universe, and in that room with the city lights flickering below us, I could have been anyone. I could have been anywhere. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But when it was over, when the frenzy had faded and we were lying side by side in the tangled sheets, I felt the shame creeping in. It was a cold, insidious thing slithering into the spaces where the warmth had been. I looked at Marcus, at his handsome face relaxed in sleep, and I realized that I didn't know him. I didn't know anything about him. He was a stranger, a beautiful, talented stranger who had just seen me at my most vulnerable, and I had given myself to him without hesitation, without a thought for the consequences. I slipped out of bed and started gathering my clothes. Marcus stirred, opening one eye to look at me. Leaving already? He asked, his voice thick with sleep. I have to get home, I said. Derek will wonder where I am. He'll wonder anyway, Marcus said. You know that, right? He's not stupid. He's going to figure out what's happening eventually. I stopped dressing and looked at him. What do you mean? Marcus sat up, the sheets pooling around his waist. I mean that you're not as good at hiding things as you think you are. Derek is a lot of things, but he's not blind. He sees the way you look at him now, or more accurately, the way you don't look at him. He sees the distance. He just doesn't want to admit it. He wants to believe that this is all part of his grand plan, that he's still in control, but he's not. You took that from him the minute you called me. I felt a chill run down my spine. He was right. Of course he was right. I had been so focused on my own desires, my own quest for power, that I had forgotten the most basic rule of deception. You can only lie to someone for so long before they start to see the cracks. What do you want me to do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus shrugged. I don't want you to do anything. I just wanted you to know that I see you, the real you. The one who's not afraid to burn her life down to feel something. And I think that woman is magnificent, but she's also playing a very dangerous game, and if you're not careful, you're going to lose everything. I finished dressing in silence, my mind racing. When I was ready to leave, I walked to the door and paused, my hand on the handle. Will I see you again? I asked, not turning around. I think that's up to you, Marcus said. But you should know that I'm not the only one who's interested. Deshaun has been asking about you. He wants to see you too, alone. It's up to you if you want to make that happen. I walked out of the room without answering. The drive home was a blur, my mind churning with 1,000 conflicting thoughts. Derek was waiting for me on the couch when I got back, and he looked up with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. How was the book club? He asked. Fine, I said, dropping my keys in the bowl by the door. Just fine. He nodded, and I could see him searching my face for something, a clue, a sign, anything that might tell him what I was really doing. But I had become an expert at hiding. I had been hiding for years, hiding my discontent, my unhappiness, my slow, suffocating disappearance. Now I was just hiding something different, something darker. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling, Marcus's words echoing in my head. He was right. I was playing a dangerous game, but the thing about dangerous games is that they're addictive. Once you start, you can't stop. You keep pushing the boundaries, taking bigger risks, chasing that high until it inevitably, destructively consumes you, and I was already too far gone to turn back. The next morning, I woke up with a resolution that felt like a stone in my chest. I was going to see Deshaun. I was going to keep playing this game, keep feeding this hunger until I had taken back every piece of myself I had ever given away. But I was also going to protect myself. I was going to be smart. I was going to be careful. And I was going to make sure that when the fallout came, because it would come, I knew it would, I was the one who walked away whole. I didn't know then how wrong I was. I didn't know that I was already broken, that the pieces I was trying so hard to reclaim were scattered so far and wide that I would never be able to put myself back together. I didn't know that the fire I was playing with would eventually burn everything I loved to ash. All I knew was that I was finally awake. And I was determined to stay that way, no matter what it cost. The days between my meeting with Marcus and the night I agreed to see Deshaun were a study in calculated detachment. I moved through my life like an actress on a stage, delivering my lines with precision, hitting my marks, smiling at the right moments and sighing at the right ones. Derek was so wrapped up in his own world, his own fantasies, that he didn't notice the performance. He was planning our next group encounter, texting me photos of potential new partners, describing scenarios that grew increasingly elaborate and increasingly depraved. I listened, I nodded, I made vague noises of agreement, and all the while I was building a separate reality, a parallel world where I was the one in control, the one making the choices, the one who held all the power. I met Deshaun on a Thursday night in a different hotel on the other side of the city. He was waiting for me in the bar downstairs, nursing a glass of whiskey and looking like he had just stepped out of a magazine spread. He was taller than Marcus, broader, with a quiet intensity that made me feel like I was being studied, examined, weighed, and measured. When I sat down across from him, he didn't smile. He just looked at me with those dark, unreadable eyes and said, Marcus told me you were something special. He wasn't wrong. I ordered a drink, something expensive I didn't recognize, and I let the silence stretch between us. I was learning slowly that silence was a weapon, that the person who spoke first was the person who gave away their power. Deshaun understood this. He was patient, unhurried, content to sit and watch me with that quiet, assessing gaze until I was the one who broke. So I said finally, is this just a business transaction to you, or is there something more? He laughed, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the table. You're direct. I like that. Most women dance around the question. They want to know if I'm interested in them, but they're too afraid to ask. You just come right out with it. I don't have time for dancing, I said. I've spent too much of my life doing that. I'm done pretending. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes never leaving mine. To answer your question, I don't know what this is yet. I know that Marcus likes you. I know that I've been curious about you since that first night. I know that I've thought about you more than I should have. And I know that you're a dangerous woman, Chloe. The kind of woman who gets men into trouble. The kind of woman who changes things. Good, I said, and I took a sip of my drink to hide the tremor in my hand. I'm tired of being the kind of woman who doesn't change anything. We went upstairs, and the night unfolded in a haze of sensation and emotion that was different from anything I had experienced with Marcus. Where Marcus was patient and skilled, Deshawn was intense, almost brutal. He didn't ask what I wanted, he took what he wanted, and he made me feel like I wanted it too. He pushed me to my limits, and beyond, and in the aftermath, when I was lying in the dark with his arm draped over my waist and his breath warm against my neck, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt alive. I felt powerful. I felt like I had finally taken back control of my own body, my own pleasure, my own life. But the morning after was always the hardest. The sun would creep through the curtains, casting long, accusing shadows across the bed, and I would lie there, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the woman I was becoming with the woman I used to be. I would think about Derek, about the way he had looked at me that first night, so full of hope and excitement and a desperate, pathetic need. I would think about the promises I had made, the vows I had spoken, the life I had built. And I would feel the guilt, the shame, the crushing weight of my own betrayal. But then I would think about the way Deshawn had held me, the way Marcus had looked at me, the way both of them had seen me as something more than a wife, more than a homemaker, more than a function. And the guilt would fade, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was not going back. I could never go back. The old Chloe was gone, buried somewhere in the wreckage of that first night, and the woman who remained was someone else entirely. Someone who was capable of things I had never imagined. Someone who was willing to burn it all down to feel something real. Derek started to suspect something a few weeks later. It was a Sunday morning, and I was making breakfast, scrambling eggs and frying bacon, when he came into the kitchen with his phone in his hand. He was holding it out to me, a photo on the screen, and his face was pale, his jaw tight. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice strained. I looked at the photo. It was me walking out of the hotel where I had met Deshawn. The image was grainy, taken from a distance, but it was unmistakably me. My heart seized in my chest, but I kept my face neutral, my voice calm. "That's not me," I said. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Chloe," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "I know it's you. I know you've been seeing someone. I've seen the way you look at your phone, the way you disappear for hours, the way you've been pulling away from me. I'm not stupid. I wanted to believe it wasn't true." I set down the spatula and turned to face him. The guilt was there, a cold, heavy weight in my chest, but I pushed it down. I had come too far to let it stop me now. "If you know everything, then you know why I did it," I said, my voice low and steady. "You pushed me into this, Derek. You made me do this. You invited strangers into our home, into our bed, and you expected me to just go along with it like it was some kind of game. But it wasn't a game. It was never a game. It was you using me to fulfill your own pathetic fantasy, and I was just supposed to smile and play along." He flinched like I had slapped him. "That's not fair," he said. "I did that for us. I did that for you. I wanted to give you something you needed, something I couldn't give you." "You wanted to give me what you thought I needed," I said. "You never asked me what I actually wanted. You never asked me how I felt. You just assumed that because you wanted it, I wanted it too. And that's the story of our entire marriage, isn't it? You making decisions and me just going along with them. Well, I'm done going along with it. I'm done being invisible. I'm done being your puppet." He stared at me, his mouth open, his face a mask of shock and hurt. "So that's it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You're just going to throw everything away? 11 years. Our life together?" "No," I said. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just finally taking it back. I'm taking back my body, my desire, my right to feel like a real person. And if that means I have to do things you don't approve of, then so be it." He didn't say anything. He just turned and walked out of the kitchen, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. I heard him go upstairs, heard the bedroom door close, heard the silence that followed. And I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by the sizzling bacon and the smell of eggs, and I felt nothing. No regret, no sorrow, just a cold, hard satisfaction. I had finally said the things I had been holding inside for years. I had finally taken a stand, and whatever happened next, I was ready for it. But I wasn't ready for what happened next, because Derek didn't leave. He didn't throw me out or file for divorce or even sleep on the couch. He just withdrew. He stopped talking to me, stopped looking at me, stopped acknowledging my existence. He went to work, he came home, he ate dinner in silence, and he disappeared into his study, where he stayed until late into the night. I was living with a ghost, a specter of the man I had married, and the silence was worse than any argument. It was a punishment, a slow, deliberate erosion of everything we had ever had. And in that silence, I started to fall apart. The power I had felt, the control I had seized, it all started to crumble. I began to doubt myself, to question whether I had been wrong, whether I had thrown away a good thing for a fleeting moment of pleasure. I stopped seeing Marcus and Deshawn. I didn't have the energy, didn't have the will. I just went through the motions day after day, waiting for something to change, something to shatter the unbearable stillness. Then one night, Derek came into the bedroom while I was getting ready for bed. He was holding a piece of paper and his face was unreadable. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice flat and distant. "And I've decided what I want to do." I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. What do you mean? He held out the paper. It was a list of names: Marcus, Deshawn, 3 others I didn't recognize. I want you to do it again, he said, but this time it's not going to be at our house. It's going to be somewhere else, and I'm not going to be there. I'm going to watch from a distance. I'm going to see everything, but you're not going to know I'm there. I want you to feel like you're completely alone with them. I want to see the real you, the one that doesn't know I'm watching. I felt the blood drain from my face. You want to spy on me? I want to see the truth, he said. I want to know who you really are, Chloe. I want to see the woman you've become. And if you do this, if you go through with it, then maybe we can find a way back to each other. Maybe we can salvage something. I stared at him, at the man I had loved, the man I had betrayed, the man who was now asking me to betray him again in the most grotesque way possible. And I realized in that moment that we were both broken, we were both lost, and neither of us knew how to find our way back. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper, I'll do it.
আমার কলিজা কইজা কাটার